Good day, everyone. Welcome to Chapter 4, Lessons 8 and 9 of Educ 105, Assessment and Learning 1. I am glad to have you all here today as we begin a very important and practical lesson that connects two powerful concepts in education: assessment strategies and multiple intelligences. Before we jump into the content, let me orient you on what we will be covering in this lesson. Today is structured in two major parts. In the first part, Lesson 8, we will revisit Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences and examine specific assessment tasks that correspond to each type of intelligence. In second part, Lesson 9, we will explore how assessment is defined, structured, and operationalized within the Matatag curriculum, which is the current framework guiding K 12 education in the Philippines. Our two learning outcomes today are: first, to be able to give example of assessment task for each multiple intelligence, and second, to explain at least three key features of assessment in the Matatag curriculum. I encourage you to take notes as we go along because much of what we discuss here will be directly applicable to your future practice as teachers. Shall we begin? Let us start with a fundamental truth about our learners. Every student who enters your classroom is unique. Not only do they differ in personality, background, and experience, they also differ on how they learn, process information, and demonstrate their understanding. This is what we mean when we say that learners have multiple intelligences and varied learning styles. Howard Gardner, a developmental psychologist from Harvard University, challenged the traditional idea that intelligence is a single, fixed ability that can be measured by a standard IQ test. Instead, he proposed that human beings possess a range of distinct intelligences, and each person has a unique combination of these, some stronger, some weaker. What does this mean for teachers? It means that if we only assess our students through one method, say written examinations, we are only measuring the intelligence of students who happen to excel at that particular format. We are missing the full picture of what all our learners know and can do. So, the introduction of this lesson makes a very clear and important statement. Teachers truly consider learners' multiple intelligences when they make use of a variety of assessment tools and tasks. In other words, variety and assessment is not just a teaching strategy, it is a matter of educational equity. When we diversify our assessment methods, we give every learner a fair chance to shine. Think about this way. Imagine a student who deeply understands a science concept but struggles with written explanations or expressions. If only way if the only way to assess that student is through an essay or a written exam, their grade will not accurately reflect their understanding. But if we offer them the option to demonstrate their knowledge through a model, a diagram, or even a performance, we get a much truer picture of their learning. So think about how you were assessed in elementary or high school. Were those assessments fair to all types of learners? So which intelligence do you think was favored by traditional assessments? Okay, let us now have this diagram. This diagram presents us with a visual overview of Gardner's multiple intelligences. Take a moment to look at it carefully. You will notice that the wheel is divided into 8 sections, each representing a distinct type of intelligence with its own smart label. Let us name and briefly preview each one before we go into detail of the following slides. Musical intelligence or music smart, the ability to produce and appreciate a rhythm, pitch, and timbre. Next, the bodily kinesthetic intelligence or the body smart. This is the ability to control body movements and handle objects skillfully. Next, the interpersonal intelligence or the people smart. The capacity to understand and respond to the moods, motivations, and desires of others. Next, verbal linguistic intelligence or the word smart. This is people who are well developed verbal skills and sensitivity to the sounds and meanings of language. Next, logical mathematical intelligence or the logic smart, the ability to think abstractly and discern logical and numerical patterns. Sixth one, the naturalist intelligence or the nature smart, the ability to recognize and categorize objects in nature. Next one, the intrapersonal intelligence or the self smart, the capacity to be self aware and reflective about one's own inner life. And the spatial visual intelligence or the picture smart. This is the capacity to think in images and visualize accurately. So later, Gardner proposed a ninth intelligence. This is the existential intelligence, which involves the capacity to grapple with deep philosophical questions about life and existence. So we will discuss this in more detail shortly. So, what is important to understand right now is that no single intelligence is more valuable than another. Every student in our future classroom will possess a unique combination of these intelligences. So, as teachers, our job is to recognize and honor those differences through the way we teach, and most importantly, through the way we assess. Let us now examine our first three intelligences in greater depth. Verbal linguistic intelligence. It is characterized by well developed verbal skills and heightened sensitivity to the sounds, meanings, and rhythm of words. So, students who are strong in this intelligence tend to love reading, writing, storytelling, memorizing words, and playing word games. So, they think in words rather than pictures. So, in the classroom, you will notice them as students who express themselves eloquently, enjoy debates, and can articulate their thoughts with clarity and precision. When assessing verbal linguistic learners, tasks such as essay writing, oral reports, storytelling, poetry composition, and journaling are highly appropriate. These methods allow them to demonstrate learning through their strongest channel. Next one is the logical mathematical intelligence. So this is this ability to think conceptually and abstractly, and the capacity to discern logical and numerical patterns. So these are your logic smart learners. They love numbers, patterns, scientific experiments, and logical reasoning. They tend to ask a lot of why and how questions, enjoy solving puzzles, and are drawn to subjects like math, science, and computer programming. So, assessments for logical mathematical learners work best when they involve problem solving or data analysis, scientific investigation, and structure argumentation. So asking them to explain a concept through a logical framework and mathematical model is far more meaningful than asking them to write a poem about it. And next one, we have this spatial visual intelligence. This is the capacity to think in images and pictures, to visualize accurately and abstractly, or the picture smart learners. So they perceive the visual world with great accuracy and can recreate it in their minds. They are often drawn to art, architecture, maps, puzzles, and design. So they may doodle while listening, not because they are distracted, but because a visual representation helps them process information. So effective assessments of spatial visual learners include drawing, diagramming, creating graphic organizers, designing posters, building models, and producing visual presentations. So these tasks tap into their natural way of making sense of the world. So, for example, if you are teaching the water cycle, a verbal linguistics student might write a narrative description. A logical mathematical student might create a labeled flowchart with equations, and a spatial visual student might draw a detailed illustration. All three demonstrate the same knowledge, just through different intelligences. And we continue to the next three intelligences. Next one, bodily kinesthetic intelligence. This is the ability to control one's body movements skillfully and to handle objects with precision. So students who are strong in this intelligence are your body smart learners. They learn best through physical activity, like hands-on experience and movement. They may find it difficult to sit still for long periods because their bodies are their primary tool for understanding the world. Think of athletes, dancers, surgeons, craftspeople, and actors. So, assessing bodily kinesthetic learners works best through performance based tasks. Ask them to demonstrate a concept through movement or build a physical model, conduct a laboratory experiment hands on, act out a historical event, choreograph a sequence that presents a process. The physical act of doing is how they show what they know. Next one is the musical intelligence. This is the ability to produce and appreciate rhythm, pitch, and timbre. These are your music smart learners. They are deeply sensitive to sound patterns and may learn more effectively when information is presented rhythmically or musically. You may notice them tapping rhythms absent-mindedly, humming while working, or connecting new content to a song they already know. So for musical learners, assessments that involve creating songs or jingles about a concept, identifying rhythmic patterns in literature or science, or presenting information through a musical performance are especially effective. These tasks may feel unconventional, but they are pedagogically sound and deeply meaningful for these students. Next one, the interpersonal intelligence. This is the capacity to detect and respond appropriately to the moods, motivations, and desires of others. Or people smart learners are naturally empathetic, com- communicative, and collaborative. They thrive in social settings and often emerge as leaders or mediators in group activities. So they understand people intuitively and are skilled to navigating social dynamics. So interpersonal learners are best assessed through collaborative tasks, group projects, peer teaching, community service reflections, and role play scenarios that require them to interact with and respond to others. So simply placing them in a group, however, is not enough. The assessment task must genuinely require interpersonal skills to be demonstrated. So, as a future teacher, which of these three intelligence do you think is most commonly overlooked in traditional classroom assessments? What could you do to assess that gap? Okay, we now arrive at the final three intelligences in Gardner's framework. We have this intrapersonal intelligence. This is the capacity to be self-aware and in tune with one's inner feelings, values, beliefs, and thinking process. So self-smart learners are deeply reflective individuals. They understand themselves well and highly introspective and are often drawn to independent work like journaling and personal goal setting. They may seem quiet or reserved, but inside, they are constantly processing their experience and making meaning. So, assessments for intrapersonal learners should include opportunities for self reflection and self evaluation. Ask them to write personal reflections, set and monitor their own learning goals, and describe their values in relation to a concept. Self assess their own work using a rubric or keep a learning journal. These tasks honor their inner world and produce a rich evidence of learning. Next one, the naturalist intelligence. This is the ability to recognize, categorize, and interact with objects and organisms in the natural environment. The nature smart learners are observant, curious, and deeply connected to the natural world. They may love biology, ecology, or geography, and they often notice things in nature that works or overlook. Think of botanists, environmentalists, farmers, and zoologists. So these are kind of nature smart learners. So to assess naturalist learners effectively, give them tasks that involve observation and documentation of the natural world. They can create nature journals and conduct environmental surveys, care for school gardens or animals, classify natural specimens, or analyze ecological data. So these tasks connect academic content to the living world around them. And lastly, the existential intelligence. This is the sensitivity and capacity to tackle deep philosophical questions about human existence. Questions like, what is the meaning of life? Why do we die? Or how did we get here? So Garner sometimes refers this to as the big questions intelligence. So students with existential intelligence are drawn to philosophy, religion, ethics, and deeper why behind human experience. So assessment tasks for existential learners involve deep reflection and philosophical inquiry. Ask them to analyze the meaning behind a poem, a story, or a historical event. Reflect on their personal values, discuss ethical dilemmas, or write about a piece of literature reveals about human condition. These tasks go beyond surface level recall, remembering, and invite genuine intellectual depth. So, as you can see, each intelligence requires a different kind of assessment. The challenge and the opportunity for you as future teachers is to design tasks that are varied, inclusive, and genuinely meaningful to the full range of learners in your classroom. Now that we have a solid foundation or solid understanding of each intelligence, let us now look at a concrete classroom ready assessment task. So this table presents a specific examples organized under four intelligences: linguistic, logical, bodily kinesthetic, and visual. So each item in the table represents a task template. Note that the blank lines at the end of each task are intentional, meant for you to fill in with your specific topic or content area. So, linguistic assessment tasks include using storytelling to explain a concept, conducting a debate on a chosen issue, writing a poem, myth, legend, short play or news article, creating talk show or radio program, and conducting an interview. These tasks require students to use language, spoken or written, as their primary mode of expression. For logical mathematical assessment tasks include translating an idea into a mathematical formula, designing and conducting an experiment, making up syllogisms to demonstrate understanding, creating analogies to explain a concept, and describing the patterns of symmetry found in a subject. These tasks push students to think systematically and abstractly. The bodily kinesthetic assessment tasks include creating a movement or sequence of movements to explain a concept, making task or puzzle cards, building or constructing a model or artifact, planning and attending a field trip related to the lesson, and bringing hands-on materials to class to demonstrate understanding. These tasks engage the body as a learning and assessment tool. So the visual spatial assessment task include creating a chart, map, cluster, or graph, or producing a slideshow, a videotape, or photo album, creating a piece of art that demonstrates understanding, inventing a board game or card game, and illustrating, drawing, paintings, sketching, and sculpting a concept. These tasks translate knowledge into visual form. So let me emphasize something important here. These are not alternative or less academic assessments. They are legitimate, rigorous, and deeply aligned with learning outcomes. A student who builds a model demonstrating a structure of a cell is showing the same and arguably deeper understanding a student who writes a paragraph about it. So the difference is the intelligence being utilized, not the level of thinking required. The second table extends our examples to cover the remaining five intelligences like the musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalist, and existential. Together with the previous table, this gives you a comprehensive bank of assessment strategies aligned to all nine intelligences. So we have this musical assessment task like give a presentation with appropriate musical accompaniment on others. We have this interpersonal like conducting a meeting to address an issue. Next one, the intrapersonal, describing personal qualities that will help complete a task successfully. From the naturalist, creating observation notebooks of natural phenomena describing changes in the local and global environment. And for the existential, we have this reflecting on which line of a song or poem is most meaningful and explaining why. So notice that many of these tasks overlap across intelligences. A reflective journal, for instance, can serve both intrapersonal and existential learners. A nature observation notebook can engage both naturalist and spatial or visual spatial learners. So as a teacher, you have the freedom to design tasks that honor multiple intelligences at once, making your assessments both efficient and inclusive. Right now, we transition to the second major part of our lesson, the lesson 9, the assessment of learning outcomes in the Matatag curriculum. So before we begin, let me briefly contextualize the Matatag curriculum for those who may need a refresher. The Matatag curriculum is the revised K-12 basic education curriculum of the Philippines, launched by the Department of Education under DepEd Order number 014, series of 2023. The word Matatag reflects its core goal: to build a resilient, stable, and empowered generation of Filipino learners. The curriculum was designed in response to several challenges identified in the previous curriculum, which is the K-12, including content overload, misalignment between learning competencies and assessment, and the need for stronger emphasis on foundational skills, especially literacy and numeracy. The Matatag curriculum streamlines the number of competencies, focuses on what is most essential, and anchors instruction on evidence-based practices. So central to this curriculum is the role of assessment. Assessment in Matatag is not treated as a separate event that happens after learning. It is embedded throughout the entire learning process. So in this lesson, we will unpack how that works, what principles guide it, what approaches are used, and what specific tools support it. Let us begin with the foundational definition of classroom assessment as it is used in the Matatag curriculum. This definition comes from DepEd Order number 8, series of 2015, or the policy guidelines on classroom assessment for the K-12 basic education program, which remains the cornerstone policy of classroom assessment in the Philippines. According to this policy, classroom assessment is an ongoing process of identifying, gathering, organizing, and interpreting quantitative and qualitative information about what learners know and can do. So let us unpack this definition word by word. First, it is ongoing, meaning it does not happen only once. At the end of a unit or quarter, assessment is continuous. It happens before instruction begins. Why? To understand what students already know. Next one, during instruction, to check for understanding in real time. And after instruction, to determine whether learning goals were met. Second, it involves both quantitative and qualitative form. Quantitative data refers to numerical scores and measurable outcomes like quiz results, test scores, percentage, and so on. While qualitative data refers to descriptive, non-numerical evidence like teacher observations, student reflections, portfolio entries, and anecdotal records. So effective classroom assessment gathers both of data to build a fuller picture of student learning. The third one, classroom assessment serves multiple purposes. It is an integral part of curriculum implementation, which allows teachers to, first one, track and measure learning or learners' progress over time, or adjust instruction based on what the data reveals about students' needs, and communicate with learners and their parents or legal guardians about progress. So, this last point is particularly important. Assessment data should not, or this last point is particularly important. Assessment data should not stay locked in a grade book. It should be shared transparently with all stakeholders. So in summary, classroom assessment in the Matatag curriculum is not a single test or event. It is a continuous, data-driven, and communicative practice that sits at the heart of good teaching. The second key feature of assessment in the Matatag curriculum concerns the central role of the teacher and the integration of technology in the assessment process. Teachers play a crucial role in gauging and monitoring the or the learning progress of their learners and guiding them toward realizing their full potential. This statement from the curriculum is both an affirmation and a responsibility. It affirms that teachers are not merely deliverers of content. They are professional evaluators, mentors, and guides who most constantly read the room. So to speak and respond to what they observe. Monitoring student progress is not a passive activity. It requires deliberate observation, careful record keeping, thoughtful analysis of data, and timely feedback. Or teachers who do this well, like record keeping, thoughtful analysis of data, do not wait until the quarterly exam to find out if a student is failing behind. They catch it early and intervene. So the Matatag curriculum also specifically encourages teachers to optimize the use of technology in assessing learning at any learning phase. So this means digital tools are not optional extras. They are recognized as legitimate and valuable components of a modern assessment system. What does this look like in practice? Like, consider using online polling tools like Mentimeter or Slido to check for understanding during a lesson. Use digital portfolios to track student work over time, or employ learning management systems that automatically generate data on student engagement and performance, or use video recordings to capture performance-based assessments. So all of these leverage technology to make assessment more efficient, more comprehensive, and more accessible. However, technology is a tool, not a replacement for good professional judgment. The teacher's role in interpreting data, providing compassionate feedback, and making informed instructional decisions remains irreplaceable. So technology supports this role, it does not substitute for it. So please remember that. So the guide for implementing all of this remains grounded in the DepEd Order number 8 series of 2015. So which mandates that utilization of various evidence-based classroom assessment practices. So evidence based means that every assessment decision, what to assess, how to assess it, and how to respond to results must be rooted in actual student data, not assumption or habit. The third key feature brings us to a set of guiding principles for assessment in the Matatag curriculum. In addition to Department Order or DepEd Order number 8 series of 2015, the DepEd Department of Education issued the DepEd Order 031 series of 2020, the interim guidelines for assessment and grading in light of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan to supplement the earlier order and respond to the challenges brought about by the pandemic. So these guidelines are grounded on five core principles that every teacher must internalize. Principle A: assessment should be holistic and authentic. In capturing the attainment of the most essential learning competencies. Holistic means looking at the whole learner, not just one facet of their performance on one day. Authentic means assessing through real world, meaningful tasks rather than artificial exercises that have no connection to actual application. Like for example, asking students to write a business proposal for a community problem, which is more holistic and authentic than asking them to memorize a definition of economics. Principle B: assessment is integral for understanding student learning and development. This principle reframes assessment as an essential part of the learning process, not something added on at the end. So when teachers assess well, they learn about their students. They discover misconceptions that need to be addressed, strengths that can be built upon, and gaps that require targeted support. So assessment in this sense is as much a tool for a teacher as it is for the student. Principle C: a variety of assessment strategies is necessary for formative assessment, taking priority to inform teaching and promote growth and mastery. So this principle directly connects back to our discussion of multiple intelligences. Like variety is not just good practice. It is a principle of equitable education. And among the variety of strategies, formative assessment is emphasized as the most critical because it happens during learning and can still influence outcomes. The summative assessment, by contrast, records outcomes that have already been determined. Principle D: assessment and feedback should be a shared responsibility among teachers, learners, and their families. This principle promotes a collaborative and transparent assessment culture. Like students should not experience assessment as something that is done to them. They should be active participants. Similarly, parents and guardians should be regularly informed and involved. When families understand how and why their child is being assessed, they are better equipped to provide support at home. Principle E, assessment and grading should have a positive impact on learning. So, this final principle is perhaps the most important of all. Every assessment should leave the student in a better position than before, more informed about their progress, more motivated to improve, more confident in their abilities, or more clear about what they need to work on. So assessments that merely punish failure or rank students without offering a path forward violate this principle. So these five principles are not abstract ideals. They are a practical philosophy for how you will design, implement, and communicate assessments in your future classroom. The fourth key feature of assessment in the Matatag curriculum introduces us to the three assessment approaches that form its comprehensive framework. These three approaches are assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning. Together, they represent a complete cycle of assessment, one that begins before learning ends, continues throughout the process, and concludes after learning is complete. So it is important to understand that these three approaches are not alternatives to one another. They are complementary. So an effective teachers uses all three intentionally at different points of the instructional cycle. Assessment for learning. So this is the first and most ongoing of the three approaches. It involves the use of formative assessments to monitor student progress or identifying learning needs and provide timely feedback that guides instructions. So the key word here is for. So this type of assessment is designed for the purpose of improving learning. So it happens while learning is still in progress, which means that the data it generates can still change outcomes. So if a teacher discovers through assessment for learning that most students have a misconception about a concept, they can reteach it before the unit ends. So, or if they find that a particular student is failing behind or falling behind, they can provide additional support before the student reaches a point of failure. So, examples of assessment for learning strategies includes exit tickets at the end of a lesson, observation checklist during activities, questioning techniques during discussion, quick quizzes or check-ins, and informal one-on-one conferences. One of or none of these need to be graded. Their purpose is diagnostic and instructional, not evaluative. So this approach allows teachers to adapt their teaching strategies to better meet the diverse needs of their learners. It aligns with the Matatag curriculum that emphasizes on evidence-based and responsive teaching practices. So a teacher who only assesses at the end is like a doctor who only checks a patient's health after the treatment is already done. The information arrives too late to be truly useful. So a practical classroom example is that after explaining a concept, a teacher asks student to write one sentence summarizing what they learned and one question they still have. The teacher reads this quickly and uses them to adjust the next day's lesson. This is assessment for learning in action. Simple, immediate, and useful. The second assessment approach is assessment as learning. This is perhaps the most transformative of the three because it places the learner at the center of the assessment process. So, assessment as learning involves engaging learners in self assessment and reflection processes for them to develop their metacognitive skills and foster ownership of their own learning. The word metacognition refers to thinking about thinking, the ability to monitor, evaluate, and regulate one's own thought processes and learning strategies. Why is this so important? Research in educational psychology consistently shows that learners who develop strong metacognitive skills are better able to transfer knowledge to new situations. So, these learners also persist through difficulty, identify their own weaknesses, and address them, and become independent, self directed learners. They are exactly the qualities that the Matatag curriculum aims to develop. So, by involving our students or learners in the assessment process, teachers empower them to set personal learning goals, monitor their own progress toward those goals, reflect honestly on the quality of their work, seek feedback and use it constructively, and take genuine responsibility for their learning outcomes. So, this component aligns with the Matatag curriculum's goal of cultivating lifelong learners who are intrinsically motivated and actively engaged in their own learning progress. So, practical examples of assessment as learning includes self-assessment checklist and rubrics that students complete before submitting work, reflective journals where students write about their learning process, peer assessment activities where students give and receive structured feedback, goal setting conferences at the beginning of a unit, and student-led parent conferences where learners present their own portfolios and discuss their progress. So, one important caution, assessment as learning does not simply means asking students, how do you think you did? Without structure or criteria. For it to be meaningful, students must be taught how to assess or how to self-assess accurately. They need clear rubrics, modeled examples, and guided practice in evaluating their own work honestly and constructively. The third assessment approach is assessment of learning. And this is the one that most people are most familiar with because it encompasses the summative assessments that generate the grades in a student's report card. So, assessment of learning encompasses a summative assessment that measure student achievement against predetermined standards of learning outcomes. Unlike formative assessment, which happens during learning, summative assessment happens at the end of a block learning, whether that is end of a unit, a quarter, or a school year. So its primary purpose is to measure the extent to which learners have mastered the content and performance standards. So the result of these assessments are used as the basis for computing grades and for making important decisions about student progress or promotion and intervention. So the common example of assessment of learning include quarterly exams, unit tests, final performance task, culminating projects, and standardized assessments administered at the national or school level. Now, here is a critical nuance that the Matatag curriculum emphasizes. Summative assessments should be used meaningfully or thoughtfully, carefully, and with full awareness of their limitations. They should be used alongside, not instead of, formative and self assessment strategies. Why? Because a single exam score at the end of a unit taken on one day or one format may not accurately capture everything a student has learned over the course of several weeks. A student who struggled on test day due to illness, anxiety, or a bad night's sleep may receive a grade that does not reflect their true ability. So, assessment of learning must therefore be balanced by the richer, more textured picture of student learning that assessment for learning and assessment as learning provide. So, together, all three approaches, assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning, form a comprehensive, balanced, and student centered framework. So each approach answers a different question. How is the student progressing? That's assessment for learning. How is the student developing as a learner? Assessment as learning. What has the student achieved? Assessment of learning. The fifth key feature of assessment in the Matatag curriculum introduces us to specific standardized assessment tools that the teacher are expected to use in addition to their regular classroom assessment. So these tools serve particular purposes at specific grade levels and provide structured, evidence-based data to support teaching and intervention decisions. Four major tools are identified: the Phil ECD checklist, the Phil ERI, the CRLA, and the RMA. Let us examine each one carefully. The Philippine Early Childhood Development or the Phil ECD checklist is a developmental screening tool that is administered twice a year, at the beginning and at the end of the school year. It is designed primarily for use in kindergarten and the early primary grades, where teachers need to understand not just academic readiness, but overall developmental readiness. The PhilECD checklist provides relevant information about learners' proficiency across key developmental domains, including physical development, the gross and the fine motor skills, the language development, cognitive development, social emotional development, and self-help skills. So these domains represents the milestone that children are expected to reach at particular ages and stages. Beyond measuring typical development, the checklist also insists or assists in detecting possible developmental delays among learners who may need further assessment or special intervention. So, early detection is critical. The earlier a developmental concern is identified, the more effective and impactful the intervention can be. So, as a teacher, understanding how to administer and interpret the Field ECD checklist will be an important professional competency, particularly if you teach in the early grades. It equips you to see each child as a whole developing person, not just a student with a grade. Next one, The Philippine Informal Reading Inventory or the PhilIRI. This is one of the most widely used assessment tools in Philippine basic education. It is a formal assessment tool that measures and describes learners' reading proficiency across three key levels: the independent level, the instructional level, and the frustration level. In both oral reading, silent reading, and listening comprehension, and in both English and Filipino. So let us clarify what each level means. The independent level refers to the reading material that the student can read easily and fluently on their own, with minimal errors and high comprehension. The instructional level refers to material that is appropriately challenging, or the student needs some teacher support but can make progress with guidance. So this is the sweet spot for instruction. The frustration levels refers to material that is too difficult. So the student struggles significantly with both decoding and comprehension, which leads to disengagement and discouragement. So the PhilIRI helps teachers match students to appropriately leveled reading materials, a practice known as differentiated instruction. So when a teacher knows each student's reading level, they can assign text that challenge without overwhelming, supporting without boring, and build fluency with confidence. So administered at the beginning of the year, it gives teachers a crucial starting point for literacy instruction. Its use is governed by the DO number 14 series of 2018, or the policy guidelines on the administration of the revised Philippine Informal Reading Inventory, which provides standardized procedures for administration and interpretation. The CRLA, or the Comprehensive Rapid Literacy Assessment, is more targeted tool designed specifically for grades 1 to 3 learners, the foundational years of formal literacy development. So, as its name suggests, it is designed for rapid classroom level use, meaning teachers can administer it relatively quickly and use the results to make immediate instructional decisions. The comprehensive rapid literacy assessment includes a continuum of reading assessments that allows teachers to quickly classify learners according to their current reading abilities, from pre-reading through early fluency, and provide targeted instructional support accordingly. This is particularly useful for teachers managing large and diverse classrooms who need an efficient way to differentiate learning instruction, or differentiate reading instruction. So while the PhilIRI gives a more comprehensive picture of reading across grade levels, the CRLA is specifically designed for the critical window of early literacy, the grades 1 to 3, where foundational reading skills are developed and where early intervention can have the greatest long-term feedback or impact. Next one, the Rapid Mathematics Assessment. This is the numeracy counterpart to the CRLA. Where the CRLA focus on literacy, the RMA evaluates the mathematical proficiency of learners in grades 1 to 3 and provides results that serve as a significant basis for appropriate context-based intervention strategies at the school and division level. So the RMA measures foundational mathematical skills such as number sense, counting, basic operations, and pattern recognition that are critical for a child's long-term success in mathematics. So like the CRLA, it is designed to administer rapidly and to yield actionable data that teachers can use to differentiate instruction and target interventions. So the phase context-based intervention strategies is significant. Why? It means that the interventions designed in response to RMA results should not be generic. It should be tailored to the specific cultural, linguistic, and community context of the learners. For example, a student in rural Mindanao may need different materials and approaches than a student in urban Metro Manila, even if their RMA scores are similar. So together, these four tools, the PhilECD checklist, the PhilERI, CRLA, and RMA, form an integrated system of early assessment. The PhilECD covers overall child development. The PhilERI addresses reading proficiency across all primary and intermediate grades. The CRLA provides rapid literacy data for grades 1 to 3, and RMA does the same for numeracy. So when teachers use these tools alongside ongoing formative assessment practices, they are equipped to effectively identify learners who need additional support. So, tailor instruction to meet individual learning needs and systematically monitor each learner's progress toward proficiency in the two most essential foundational skills, the literacy and numeracy. So, it is important to note that these tools are not meant to label, to track, or to stigmatize students. They are diagnostic instruments. Their purpose is to inform and empower teachers to respond with precision and care. So a student who scores at the frustration level on the PhilERI is not a failing a student. They are a student who needs a more targeted support. And the PhilERI tells us exactly where to begin. So we are now approaching the conclusion of lesson 9. So it is good moment to step back and appreciate the full picture of what we have covered. Classroom assessment serves as a pillar of the Matatag curriculum, supporting teachers in their dedicated efforts to nurture resilient, adaptable, and empowered learners who are equipped with skills needed to thrive in the 21st century. This statement encapsulates the spirit of everything we have discussed today. Assessment is not a bureaucratic requirement or an administrative burden. When done well, it is one of the most powerful acts of teaching. It tells you who your students are, where they are in their learning journey, what they need next, and whether your instruction is working. It is, at its best, a deeply human and professional practice, one that honors each student's individual potential. Let us close by briefly discussing the grading system within the Matatag curriculum. The grading system shall adhere to the provisions of DO number 8 series of 2015, which establishes how grades are computed based on written works and performance tasks across all learning areas. A critically important provision in the Matatag curriculum is this: schools shall ensure that learners who are consistently performing below expectations based on written works and performance tasks receive remediation to prevent them from failing. This is not merely a suggestion, it is a mandate. A student who is consistently underperforming must receive intervention before a failing grade becomes their permanent record. This provision reflects Principle E that we discussed earlier. Assessment and grading should have a positive impact on learning. Grading in the Matatag curriculum is therefore not simply about recording performance. It is about triggering appropriate responses. A low grade should prompt action, remediation, reteaching, additional support, not passive acceptance. As future teachers, you will play a role in implementing this vision. You will be the ones who notice when a student is struggling before it is too late. You design assessments that give every learner a fair chance to succeed, who use data to inform instruction rather than simply to sort students, and who communicate with passion and clarity to learners and their families. So, and this brings to the end of our lesson for today. We have covered a great deal of ground, and I hope that what we have discussed today has not only expanded your learning, but also deepened your appreciation for the complexity and importance of assessment in teaching. Let us do a quick recap. In Lesson 8, we revised Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, all nine types, and explored a rich set of assessment tasks aligned to each intelligence. We examined two full tables of assessment strategies that you can draw from as you build your own assessment repertoires as teachers. And Lesson 9, we explored how assessments functions within the Matatag curriculum. We discussed five key features. First, classroom assessment as a continuous data-driven process. Second, the teacher's role and the integration of technology. Third, the five core principles from the O031 series of 2020. Fourth, the three assessment approaches or the three assessment approaches. Assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning. The fifth, the four specific tools, the Feel ECD checklist, the Feel ERI, CRLA, and RMA that support literacy, numeracy, and child development. I want to leave you with this thought. The best teachers are not those who give the most tests, but those who use assessment most wisely. They use it to learn about their students, to improve their teaching, to celebrate growth, and to respond the need with both urgency and compassion. Please review your notes before our next session. If you have any questions about the content we covered today, feel free to approach your teacher after class. Raise it at the beginning of our next meeting. Thank you for your active participation and thoughtful engagement for today.